The burn of scalding coffee on my wrist barely registered anymore. I'd stopped flinching 3 months ago. Around the same time, I'd stopped dreaming about anything beyond surviving the next shift at Rossi's diner. The cheap polyester uniform clung to my skin, perpetually damp with the sweat of August in Chicago, and my feet throbbed in shoes held together more by hope than stitching. "Violet, table 9 needs water, and the guy at the counter's been waiting 10 minutes for his check." Gina's shrill voice cut through the diner's din, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of the griddle, the endless loop of Frank Sinatra on the jukebox that had been broken on the same 3 songs since 1987. I grabbed the water pitcher, my reflection distorting in its scratched plastic surface. 22 years old, and I looked 40. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, my auburn hair escaping its bun in limp strands, my lips perpetually chapped from breathing through my mouth during the endless hours on my feet. "Coming," I called back, forcing brightness into my voice that I didn't feel. This wasn't supposed to be my life. 3 years ago, I'd been accepted to nursing school at Northwestern, my future stretching ahead like a highway under clear skies. My father had been so proud, his rough construction worker hands trembling as he'd held my acceptance letter. "My girl's gonna be a nurse," he'd told everyone who'd listen, his Irish accent thickening with emotion. "Gonna save lives, she is." Then came the accusation, the lie that shattered everything. Someone had stolen $50,000 from the Salvatore family, one of the most powerful crime organizations in Chicago. Someone had pointed the finger at my father, Patrick O'Connor, a man who'd never stolen so much as a newspaper in his entire life. But in the world of the Salvatores, accusations didn't require proof. They required payment. My father was given a choice: his life, or his daughter's hand in marriage to Vincent Salvatore, the heir to the criminal empire. He'd chosen to live. I'd chosen to let him. The memory of that night, 6 months ago now, still had the power to steal my breath. My father's tears, my mother's keening wail, my own numb acceptance as I'd signed papers I hadn't read, agreeing to marry a man I'd never met. "Violet, you're doing it again." Gina appeared at my elbow, her weathered face concerned. She was 53, had worked at Rossi's for 20 years, and was the closest thing I had to a friend in this new life I'd been forced into. "Spacing out. You okay, honey?" I blinked, realizing I'd been standing frozen in the middle of the floor, water pitcher in hand, lost in the past. "Sorry. Just tired." "You're always tired." She squeezed my arm gently. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't day-old pie?" I couldn't remember. Food held no appeal anymore. Nothing did, except the small bottle of sleeping pills in my purse that I rationed carefully, using them only on the worst nights when memories kept me staring at the ceiling until dawn. The diner door chimed, admitting a rush of humid air, and 3 men in expensive suits. They stood out in Rossi's like orchids in a garbage dump. Tailored fabric, polished shoes, the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to check a price tag or worry about next month's rent. Something cold slithered down my spine. I knew those suits, knew what they represented. In Chicago, certain families advertised their affiliation through subtle signals: the cut of a jacket, the style of a pocket square, the specific shade of a tie. These men wore the colors of the Salvatore organization. "Violet." Gina's voice had gone tight. Maybe I should take that table. But it was too late. The lead man, dark-haired, cold-eyed, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, had already spotted me. His gaze raked over me with the warmth of a morgue drawer, and a smile that held no humor curved his lips. Well, Mrs. Salvatore herself, slinging coffee. How the mighty have fallen. The diner had gone quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence, forks stilled halfway to mouths. Everyone in the neighborhood knew who the Salvatores were. Most people had the sense to look away when their business was being conducted. I straightened my spine, lifting my chin. They'd taken my future, my dreams, my freedom, but they couldn't have my dignity. That remained mine alone. "I'll be with you in a moment, gentlemen," I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. "Please seat yourselves wherever you'd like." The scarred man's smile widened. "Oh, we're not here to eat, sweetheart. We're here to collect." My stomach dropped. "Collect what?" "You." He tilted his head toward the door. "Boss wants to see you. Now." The pitcher slipped from my nerveless fingers, water splashing across the floor in a widening puddle. For 6 months, I'd been waiting for this moment, dreading it. The Salvatore family had paid for the wedding, a cold, clinical ceremony in a courthouse with 2 witnesses I'd never met. They'd given me a marriage certificate with Vincent Salvatore's signature beside my own. And then, nothing. No wedding night, no honeymoon, no contact of any kind. I'd been allowed to return to my parents' cramped apartment in Bridgeport, allowed to keep working at the diner, allowed to continue living as if I weren't legally bound to a man I'd seen only once. Across a courtroom, his face impassive as a judge had pronounced us husband and wife, I'd started to believe they'd forgotten about me, that maybe the marriage had been merely symbolic, a way to humiliate my father and ensure his silence about whatever he'd supposedly witnessed. Apparently, I'd been wrong. "I'm in the middle of my shift," I said, hating the tremor that had entered my voice. "I can't just leave." "You can, and you will." The scarred man stepped closer, and I smelled expensive cologne mixed with cigarette smoke. "Unless you want us to drag you out in front of all these nice people. Make a scene. Maybe take a closer look at this establishment's business license while we're at it. I'm sure Rossi's is operating completely above board, right?" The threat was clear. Cooperate, or everyone here would suffer. The owner, the staff, the regular customers who depended on this place for their daily coffee and sense of community. All of them would become collateral damage in whatever game the Salvatores were playing. "Violet, you don't have to go with them," Gina said fiercely, positioning herself between me and the men. "We can call the police." "The police?" The scarred man laughed. "Sweetheart, half the Chicago PD is on our payroll, but by all means call them. See how that works out." I touched Gina's shoulder gently. "It's okay. I'll go." "But it's okay," I repeated, putting every ounce of conviction I could muster into the words. "I'm his wife. He has every right to summon me, I suppose." The scarred man's smile turned approving. "Smart girl. Now let's not keep the boss waiting. He's not a patient man." I untied my apron with trembling fingers, my mind racing. What did Vincent Salvatore want with me after 6 months of silence? Had he decided to finally consummate the marriage? The thought made bile rise in my throat. Or worse, had he grown tired of the arrangement and decided to dispose of me permanently? That would certainly solve the problem of an unwanted wife. "Can I at least get my purse from the back?" "You've got 60 seconds. I fled to the staff room, grabbing my worn canvas bag from my locker. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, fingers hovering over my father's contact. What would I say? That his decision to throw me to the wolves was finally coming back to haunt us both? That I'd known from the beginning this reprieve was temporary? Instead, I sent a quick text to my mother. "Going to see Vincent. Will call when I can. Love you." I didn't mention that I might not be able to call, that this might be goodbye. When I returned to the dining room, the 3 men were waiting by the door. The scarred one held it open with mocking courtesy, gesturing for me to precede them. Outside, a black Lincoln Navigator idled at the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun in sharp angles of light. "After you, Mrs. Salvatore." The interior of the SUV was cool, the leather seats so soft they felt like butter. I'd never been in a vehicle this expensive, never experienced air conditioning that actually worked, never smelled new car scent mixed with the subtle aroma of wealth. It should have been pleasant. Instead, It felt like a coffin. Luxurious, but still a box carrying me toward my end. The scarred man sat in front beside the driver, while his two companions bookended me in the back. They didn't speak, didn't look at me, but their presence was oppressive. Constant reminders that I was no longer in control of my own movements or decisions. We drove north, away from Bridgeport's familiar streets, and into areas I'd only seen in magazines or movies. The neighborhoods grew progressively wealthier, brownstones giving way to modern high-rises, corner stores replaced by boutiques with single items displayed in their windows like precious art. Finally, we pulled up to a building that made my breath catch despite my fear. It soared into the sky, all glass and steel, its facade reflecting clouds and sky in dizzying patterns. A doorman in a uniform nicer than anything I owned rushed to open the vehicle door, his face carefully neutral as he helped me out. "Mrs. Salvatore," he murmured with a respectful nod that felt surreal. "Welcome." The lobby was a study in intimidating elegance. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than my parents' house, a reception desk staffed by two beautiful women who watched my approach with professional smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Penthouse," the scarred man said, guiding me toward a private elevator with a firm hand at my elbow. He inserted a key card, and the doors slid open with a soft whisper of expensive machinery. The ride-up lasted 43 seconds. I counted each one, using the numbers to anchor myself against the panic threatening to overwhelm my composure. When the doors opened again, it was directly into an apartment. No, not an apartment. A palace. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of Chicago, the city sprawling below like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. The decor was minimalist but clearly expensive. Low-slung leather furniture, a glass coffee table the size of my childhood bed, built-in bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that had probably never been read. And standing by the windows, his back to me, was a man. I knew it was Vincent Salvatore even before he turned around. Knew it from the way he held himself. The casual confidence of someone who'd never had to ask permission for anything in his life. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that tapered to a trim waist. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit molded to his frame as if it had been painted on. "Leave us," he said without turning, his voice deep and commanding. The scarred man and his companions melted away as if they'd never existed, the elevator doors closing behind them with a quiet click that sounded impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Vincent Salvatore turned to face me, and for the second time in my life, I looked directly at my husband. He was beautiful. There was no other word for it. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed with deliberate stubble, full lips that would have looked feminine on anyone else, but somehow emphasized his masculinity. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, amber shot through with gold, framed by lashes so thick they cast shadows on his cheeks, and they were looking at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. Violet. My name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a threat simultaneously. "Thank you for coming." As if I'd had a choice. "What do you want?" The words came out more confrontational than I'd intended, but I was too frightened to care about being polite. One dark eyebrow rose, and I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Surprise? Approval? Direct. I like that. He moved toward a bar cart, pouring amber liquid into a crystal glass. "Drink? No. Suit yourself." He took a sip, his gaze never leaving my face. "Do you know why I asked you here, Violet? To kill me?" The question burst out before I could stop it. To finally consummate this farce of a marriage? To tell me my father's debt still isn't paid? Take your pick. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. None of the above. He set his glass down with careful precision. "I asked you here because it's time you moved into your proper home. This penthouse. With me." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "What?" "You're my wife," he said, as if this explained everything. "You belong here, not serving coffee to truck drivers in Bridgeport." Anger, hot and pure and cleansing, flooded through me. I belong where I choose to belong. That marriage was a business transaction, nothing more. You've ignored me for 6 months. Why the sudden interest in playing house? His jaw tightened, the only sign that my words had landed. There are complications, rival families who've become aware of our arrangement. Your continued residence in an unprotected location represents a security risk. A security risk, I repeated flatly. That's what I am to you. A potential liability. "You're my wife," he corrected, an edge entering his voice. "Which makes you a target. I won't have your blood on my hands because you're too stubborn to accept reality." "Reality?" I laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "You want to talk about reality? Reality is that I was sold to you like cattle. Reality is that my father's freedom was purchased with my future. Reality is that I'm legally bound to a man who murders people for a living." Vincent moved so quickly I didn't see it coming. One moment he was across the room. The next he stood directly in front of me, so close I could smell his cologne. Something expensive with notes of cedar and spice that made my head swim despite my fury. "I have never," he said, each word precisely enunciated, "and will never harm you, Violet. Whatever you think you know about me, understand this. You are under my protection. No one touches you. No one threatens you. No one so much as looks at you wrong without answering to me. Is that clear?" I tilted my head back to meet his eyes, refusing to be intimidated despite the way my heart hammered against my ribs. "Crystal clear. I'm a possession to be protected. How romantic." His gaze dropped to my lips, lingered there for a heartbeat too long, then returned to my eyes. "You'll move in here, tonight. My men will collect your belongings." "No." The word hung between us, a gauntlet thrown. Vincent's eyes narrowed. "I'm not asking, Violet. And I'm not agreeing." I crossed my arms, a futile gesture of defiance. "You can't force me to live with you." "Can't I?" He stepped back, but his gaze pinned me in place as effectively as physical restraints. "Your father's debt was settled by our marriage, but debts can be reinstated if you prove to be an uncooperative wife." The threat crashed over me like ice water. He'd go after my father, after my mother, after everyone I loved, all because I dared to assert the smallest shred of autonomy. "You bastard," I whispered. "Yes," he agreed without a hint of remorse. "I am. But I'm a bastard who keeps his word. Cooperate, and your family remains untouched. Safe. Protected even. Refuse, and..." He let the sentence trail off, the implications clear. I had no choice. I'd never had a choice. Not from the moment my father had been accused of theft he didn't commit. "Fine," I bit out, "but I have conditions." His lips twitched, almost a smile. "Of course you do." "I keep my job at the diner. I'm saving for nursing school and I won't give that up." "Agreed, though you'll have a driver and security escort." "I have my own room, my own space. You don't get to touch me." My cheeks burned at the crude phrasing, but I pushed forward. "This may be a marriage on paper, but that doesn't give you rights to my body." Something dark and dangerous flashed in his eyes, but when he spoke, his voice was calm. "I have no intention of forcing myself on my wife, Violet. When you come to my bed, and you will eventually, it will be because you want to be there." The arrogance of the statement stole my breath. "I'd rather die." "We'll see." He turned away, dismissing my venom as if it were nothing more than a child's tantrum. "Marco will take you back to collect your things. You have 2 hours. Don't make me come looking for you." I wanted to throw something, to scream, to rage against the injustice of it all. Instead, I turned and walked to the elevator with my head high and my hands clenched into fists. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of Vincent Salvatore standing by his windows like a king surveying his kingdom. And in that kingdom, I was nothing more than another possession to be claimed, controlled, and kept. But possession worked both ways, I realized as the elevator descended. If I was trapped in this marriage, then so was he. And I'd be damned if I'd make it easy for either of us. The war between us had just begun. The black Lincoln Navigator was waiting when I emerged from my parents' building 2 hours later, a single suitcase in hand, and my mother's tears still damp on my cheeks. My father hadn't been able to look at me when I'd explained where I was going, and why. The weight of his guilt hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. But what good would recriminations do now? The deal was done, signed and sealed 6 months ago. Marco, the scarred man who'd collected me from the diner, held the vehicle door open with the same mocking courtesy he'd displayed earlier. "All packed, Mrs. Salvatore?" I didn't dignify the question with a response, sliding into the back seat and clutching my suitcase on my lap like a shield. Through the tinted windows, I watched my childhood home recede into the distance, my mother's small figure visible in the third-floor window until we turned the corner and she disappeared from view. "Boss says you're to have dinner with him tonight," Marco said from the front seat as we merged onto Lakeshore Drive. 8 o'clock. Formal attire. I don't own anything formal. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his scarred eyebrow lifting. "You do now. Check your room when we arrive." Of course. Vincent Salvatore was the type of man who thought money solved every problem, who believed he could dress me up like a doll, and I'd be grateful for the privilege. Well, he was about to learn that I was nobody's mannequin. The penthouse looked no less intimidating on my second visit. If anything, the setting sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows made it more surreal. The entire city painted in shades of gold and amber, Chicago spreading beneath us like something to be conquered. "Your room is this way." A woman appeared as if summoned. Middle-aged, elegantly dressed, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. "I'm Sophia. I manage Mr. Salvatore's household. If you need anything, you're to ask me." I followed her down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than my parents would earn in their lifetimes. She opened a door at the end, revealing a space that made my breath catch despite my determination not to be impressed. The bedroom was larger than my parents' entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, its linens pristine white against dark wood furniture. One wall was entirely windows, offering a view that would have been breathtaking if I'd been here by choice. An ensuite bathroom gleamed with marble and chrome, and a walk-in closet. "Mr. Salvatore had clothing delivered for you," Sophia said, opening the closet to reveal racks of dresses, shoes arranged by color, drawers that probably held more undergarments than I'd owned in my entire life. "Everything should fit. He's very particular about details." Particular. What a polite way to say controlling. "Dinner is at 8, Sophia continued. "Mr. Salvatore expects punctuality. I'd suggest the blue dress, second rack, fourth from the left. It will complement your coloring." She left me alone in my gilded cage, and I stood there for a long moment, trying to process the surreal reality of my situation. 6 months ago, I'd been a college student with dreams of helping people, of making a difference in the world. Now I was a mafia wife with a closet full of designer clothes I'd never asked for, and a husband who thought he could own me with the swipe of a credit card. I should refuse. Should wear my own clothes, my worn jeans and faded t-shirt, to dinner as a statement of defiance. But something told me Vincent Salvatore didn't respond well to petty rebellion. If I was going to fight him, it needed to be strategic, not childish. Besides, a traitorous part of me whispered, When was the last time I'd worn something beautiful? When had I last felt like anything other than a work-worn shadow of my former self? The blue dress Sophia had suggested fit perfectly, hugging my curves before flaring out at the waist. It was elegant without being overtly sexy. The neckline modest, but the back cut low enough to make me feel exposed. I left my hair down, a small rebellion, and applied minimal makeup from the expensive collection that had appeared on the bathroom counter. At precisely 8 o'clock, I emerged from my room to find Vincent waiting in the living area, and the sight of him stole whatever composure I'd managed to gather. He'd changed from his earlier suit into something even more devastating: black slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The top 2 buttons were undone, showing a glimpse of his collarbone and the edge of what might have been a tattoo. His dark hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered, and I caught the scent of his cologne, that same cedar and spice that had unsettled me earlier. Violet. His amber eyes traveled over me with an intensity that made my skin heat despite my anger. You look beautiful. Don't. The word came out sharper than intended. Don't pretend this is a date or that we're a real couple. I'm here because you threatened my family. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or frustration, but his expression smoothed into careful neutrality. Dinner is ready. Shall we? He led me to a dining room I hadn't noticed earlier, a space dominated by a table that could have seated 20, but was set for 2 at one end. Candles flickered in silver holders, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Wine glasses glittered beside plates of bone china so delicate they looked like they might shatter at a touch. I'm not drinking, I said as Vincent moved to pour wine. Because you're angry with me or because you don't drink? Both. His lips twitched. Fair enough. Water it is. A silent staff member appeared to serve the first course. Some sort of delicate soup that probably had a French name I wouldn't have been able to pronounce. I waited until we were alone again before speaking. How long have your men been watching me? Vincent set down his spoon with careful precision. Since the day we married. The casual admission made my stomach clench. 6 months. You've had people following me for 6 months. Protecting you, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? I leaned forward, forgetting about the food. Did your protection include monitoring my phone calls, reading my texts, following me to work, to the grocery store, to my parents' apartment? Yes. He met my gaze without flinching. All of the above. You're my wife, Violet. In my world, that makes you a target for anyone who wants to hurt me. I needed to know you were safe at all times. I needed to know I was safe, I repeated incredulously. What about what I needed? What about my privacy, my autonomy, my right to live my life without constant surveillance? You gave up those rights when you married me. The flat statement landed like a slap. I didn't marry you. I was sold to you. There's a difference. Perhaps. He took a sip of his wine, his gaze never leaving my face. But the result is the same. You're a Salvatore now, whether you like it or not, and Salvatores are protected. Protected, I said bitterly. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like being imprisoned. Vincent set down his glass with enough force to make the crystal ring. You want to know what imprisonment looks like, Violet? I'll tell you. It's the 3 widows I made last month when a rival family decided to make a statement by bombing one of my warehouses. It's the 12-year-old girl who lost both her parents in the crossfire of a territory dispute. It's the woman who had her throat slit in her own home because her husband refused to pay protection money. His voice had gone cold, deadly. That's what happens to people in my world who aren't protected. So yes, I have men watching you. Yes, I monitor your movements and communications, and I make no apologies for it, because the alternative is your corpse on a slab in the morgue while I explain to your parents why I failed to keep you safe. The graphic imagery made me recoil. but I refused to let him see how deeply his words had shaken me. And what about the violence you perpetrate? The people you hurt? The lives you destroy? I never claimed to be a good man, Violet. He leaned back in his chair, his posture deceptively relaxed despite the tension radiating from him. I am what circumstances and family legacy made me, but I am a man of honor, in my own way. I protect what's mine. And like it or not, you're mine now. There it was again. That possessive declaration that made something twist in my stomach, part anger, part fear, and a small traitorous part that responded to the raw certainty in his voice. I'm not a possession, I said, but the words sounded weak even to my own ears. No, he agreed, surprising me. You're my wife, which is infinitely more complicated. Before I could formulate a response, Sophia appeared to clear our soup bowls and serve the next course. The interruption gave me time to gather my composure, to remind myself that this man, however compelling, however magnetic, was still my captor. We ate in tense silence for several minutes before Vincent spoke again. Tell me about nursing school. I looked up sharply, suspicious of the conversational gambit. Why? Because I want to know. Because you mentioned saving money for it earlier, and I'm curious about what drives a woman to clean tables and serve coffee when she could be living in luxury. Purpose, I said flatly. Something you probably wouldn't understand. I want to help people, to make a difference. Not just coast through life on money earned through. I gestured vaguely, unable to finish the sentence. Through criminal enterprise, he finished for me, a hint of amusement in his voice. You can say it, Violet. I'm not ashamed of what I am. Maybe you should be. Maybe. He studied me with those unsettling amber eyes. But that doesn't change reality. How much do you need? For what? Nursing school, tuition, books, living expenses. Give me a number. Understanding dawned, followed immediately by indignation. I'm not taking your money. It's our money, he corrected. What's mine is yours. That's how marriage works. In real marriages, maybe. Not in whatever this is. Vincent set down his fork, giving me his full attention. Let me make something very clear, Violet. This marriage is real in every legal sense. My ring is on your finger. He reached across the table and caught my left hand, his thumb brushing over the simple platinum band I'd tried unsuccessfully to remove a dozen times. And my name is on your documents. You are Mrs. Vincent Salvatore. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us. I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip, while not painful, was unyielding. Except being your prisoner, you mean? Except being my wife, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? I challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, both involve doing exactly what you say when you say it, with no regard for what I want. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. You want to know what you'd be doing if you were truly my prisoner, Violet? You'd be locked in your room, not dining with me. You wouldn't have the freedom to work or pursue your education. You certainly wouldn't have the luxury of arguing with me without consequences. He released my hand abruptly. I'm offering you a life, not a cage. The fact that you can't see the difference is not my problem. The rest of dinner passed in cold silence. I pushed food around my plate without tasting it, too angry and confused to eat. Vincent, by contrast, seemed perfectly at ease, as if my obvious distress didn't affect him in the slightest. When Sophia finally cleared our dessert plates, untouched on my part, Vincent stood and moved to the windows overlooking the city. His hands were in his pockets, his posture casual, but I'd learned enough in the past few hours to recognize the tension in his shoulders. I have a meeting, he said, without turning around. It will last several hours. You're free to explore the penthouse, watch television, read whatever you'd like. But you don't leave this apartment without clearing it with Marco first. Understood? Perfectly, I said through gritted teeth. He finally turned to face me, and the intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. One more thing, Violet. Your bedroom door locks from the inside. I won't disturb you at night, not until you invite me to. You have my word on that. The concession should have made me feel better. Instead, it just highlighted how thoroughly he controlled every aspect of my life. Even my fear of him had been anticipated and addressed. After he left, I retreated to my room and locked the door, testing his promise. The click of the lock should have felt like security. Instead, it felt like confirmation of my powerlessness. I could lock Vincent Salvatore out of my bedroom, but I couldn't escape him. Not really. His presence permeated every inch of this penthouse, from the clothes in my closet, to the books on the shelves, to the very air I breathed. I changed into the silk pajamas that had appeared in my dresser, because of course Vincent had thought of everything, and climbed into the enormous bed. It was too soft, too comfortable, too much like sleeping on a cloud. I missed my lumpy mattress in my parents' apartment, missed the familiar sounds of the neighborhood through thin walls, missed the life I'd lost. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Are you safe, baby girl?" I typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "Yes, I'm fine. Don't worry about me." A lie, but what else could I say? That I was trapped in a penthouse with a man who saw me as a possession. That I was terrified and angry and confused by the small kindnesses he showed amidst the control. Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. "Welcome home, Mrs. Salvatore." V. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Welcome home. As if this could ever be home. As if I could ever think of Vincent Salvatore's domain as anything other than a prison, no matter how luxurious. But as I lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new life, I couldn't shake the memory of his words at dinner. "This marriage is real. My name is on your documents. You are Mrs. Vincent Salvatore." And the terrifying part was, he was right. This was real. This was my life now, and I had no idea how to survive it with my soul intact. Outside my window, Chicago glittered like a promise and a threat, and somewhere in the penthouse, my husband was conducting business I didn't want to know about. Between us lay a chasm of fear and anger, an unwilling attraction that I couldn't begin to bridge. The war between us continued, but the first battle, the battle for my physical presence in his home, had been decisively won. Now came the harder part, fighting to keep him from claiming the rest of me. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to cover, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar softness of the bed and the overwhelming quiet. No traffic noise from the street, no neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls, no smell of my mother's coffee brewing in the kitchen. For one blissful second, I thought the past 6 months had been a nightmare. Then I saw the blue dress from last night draped over a chair, and reality crashed back. My phone showed 6:15 a.m., early enough that Vincent was probably still asleep. Good. I could shower and dress without the awkward possibility of running into him. I needed time to fortify my defenses before facing another day of captivity. The bathroom was obscenely luxurious, all marble and chrome and water pressure that felt like a massage. I stood under the spray longer than necessary, using the hot water as a shield against the day ahead. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel softer than anything I'd ever owned, I found Sophia setting out coffee and pastries in my room. "Good morning, Mrs. Salvatore." Her expression was neutral, professionally courteous. "Mr. Salvatore thought you might prefer breakfast in your room this morning. He's already left for a meeting downtown." Relief warred with an emotion I refused to identify as disappointment. "Thank you, Sophia, and please just call me Violet." Her lips tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Salvatore prefers I use proper forms of address, Mrs. Salvatore." Of course he did. Even in his absence, Vincent controlled everything. I ate mechanically, barely tasting the flaky croissant or the rich coffee. My mind was already racing ahead, trying to figure out how to navigate this new reality. I needed to call the diner, let them know I wasn't coming back. The thought made my chest ache. That job had been my lifeline, my connection to normalcy. But I understood the implicit message of last night's dinner. My old life was over. Time to stop fighting the inevitable. After dressing in jeans and a sweater from my own suitcase, a small rebellion that felt pathetic, even as I committed to it, I ventured out of my room. The penthouse was eerily quiet. Just the faint hum of expensive appliances and the distant sound of traffic far below. I explored hesitantly at first, then with growing boldness when no one appeared to stop me. The penthouse was massive. I counted 4 bedrooms besides the master suite, 3 bathrooms, a media room with a screen the size of my childhood bedroom wall, and a library that made my breath catch. The library was beautiful in a way that transcended mere wealth. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined 3 walls, filled with books that ranged from leather-bound classics to contemporary paperbacks. A ladder on rails allowed access to the higher shelves, and deep leather chairs were positioned near windows that offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. I ran my fingers along the spines, reading titles, medical texts, surprisingly current, classic literature, history, philosophy. The collection revealed an intellect I hadn't expected from a man whose business was violence. Finding anything interesting? I spun around so quickly I nearly fell, my heart hammering. Vincent stood in the doorway, dressed more casually than I'd seen him before. Dark jeans and a gray sweater that did nothing to diminish his commanding presence. His hair was slightly damp, and he held a cup of coffee that I irrationally wanted to knock from his hand for startling me. "I thought you had a meeting," I said, when I'd recovered enough to speak. "Finished early." He moved into the room with that predatory grace I was coming to recognize. "I came back to check on you. Make sure you weren't trying to tunnel through the walls or fashion a rope from designer sheets." The thought crossed my mind. His lips twitched. "I appreciate your honesty, if not your escape fantasies. We're 43 floors up, Violet. Even if you made it to the ground, my men would have you back here before you reached the street." How reassuring. He studied me for a long moment, his amber eyes unreadable. "You haven't touched any of the clothes I bought you. I have my own clothes. Clothes suitable for serving coffee, not for being my wife." "Maybe that's the point," I shot back. "Maybe I don't want to be your wife." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes, but when he spoke, his voice was controlled. "What you want and what is are 2 different things. You are my wife. You'll dress accordingly, especially when we go out in public." "We're going out in public?" "Dinner with my family tonight. They want to meet you." He said it casually, as if introducing me to his criminal family was as normal as meeting for coffee. "And if I refuse, then I'll dress you myself and carry you out of here over my shoulder." He said it so matter-of-factly that I almost missed the underlying steel. "Your choice." I wanted to call his bluff, to push back against his constant control, but something in his expression told me he'd follow through on the threat without hesitation. "Fine," I bit out, "but I picked the dress. As long as it's appropriate." He set down his coffee cup and moved to the windows, his back to me. A dismissal. "Sophia will help you get ready. We leave at 7. I fled the library, anger and something uncomfortably close to fear churning in my stomach. Back in my room, I yanked open the closet and stared at the rows of expensive clothing. Each piece represented another way Vincent was trying to control me, to mold me into his vision of what a wife should be. I selected a black dress almost at random, sophisticated but not overtly sexy, with a hemline that fell just above my knees and long sleeves that covered most of my arms. If I had to play dress-up for Vincent's family, I'd do it on my terms. Sophia appeared at 6:30 to help with my hair and makeup. She worked in efficient silence, transforming my appearance with practiced skill. By the time she finished, the woman in the mirror looked polished and elegant, a stranger wearing my face. "Mr. Salvatore will be pleased," Sophia said, stepping back to admire her work. "I don't care what Mr. Salvatore thinks." Her expression remained neutral, but I caught a flash of something, pity, in her eyes. "Yes, Mrs. Salvatore." Vincent was waiting in the living room when I emerged, and the way his gaze traveled over me made heat bloom in my cheeks despite my anger. He'd changed into a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame, his hair styled back from his face in a way that highlighted the sharp angles of his cheekbones. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. I ignored the compliment, focusing instead on the practical. "Who will be there tonight?" "My mother, my 2 younger brothers, my cousin Marco, you've met him, and possibly an uncle or 2. All family." "All criminals, you mean?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "They're curious about you, about the woman who got Patrick O'Connor off the hook for stealing from us." The casual mention of my father's supposed crime made my hands clench into fists. "He didn't steal anything. You know he didn't." "Do I?" Vincent moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the enclosed space. Or did I simply find it more convenient to take a wife than to execute a man with a family? The implication stole my breath. "You're saying you never believed he was guilty?" "I'm saying I saw an opportunity and took it." His gaze dropped to my lips, lingered there for a heartbeat too long. Patrick O'Connor was a scapegoat for a theft I already knew was committed by someone else. But his daughter... Those amber eyes returned to mine, burning with an intensity that made my skin prickle. His daughter was worth more than $50,000. Worth more than finding the real thief. Worth everything. I stumbled back until my spine hit the wall, shaking my head in denial, even as my mind raced to process his words. "You ruined my life for nothing? You destroyed my future, forced me into this marriage, all because you... What? Decided you wanted me?" "Yes." No apology, no shame. Just brutal honesty that made me want to scream. "You're insane. You're completely..." "I'm a man who knows what he wants and takes it," Vincent interrupted, caging me against the wall with his arms on either side of my head. He didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the cedar and spice of his cologne. "I saw you once, just once, 6 months before your father's supposed crime. You were serving coffee at a breakfast meeting I attended in neutral territory. Do you remember?" I did. The memory surfaced with crystalline clarity. A private room at a high-end restaurant. A dozen men in expensive suits discussing business I'd been trained to ignore. One of them had looked at me, really looked, with an intensity that had made me drop a sugar packet. I'd apologized, cleaned up the mess, and fled as quickly as possible. That had been Vincent. "You arranged everything," I whispered, horror dawning. The accusation against my father, the marriage requirement, all of it was orchestrated to trap me. "To protect you," he corrected. "To claim you before someone else did. You have no idea how you looked that day, Violet. So out of place among the violence and corruption surrounding you, yet so strong. So determined to ignore the ugliness and focus on doing your job. I knew then that I had to have you. That I'd do whatever it took to make you mine." The possessive certainty in his voice should have terrified me. Instead, it ignited something dark and unwelcome in my core, a response I absolutely refused to acknowledge. "That's not love," I said, my voice shaking. "That's obsession." "Maybe." His face was inches from mine now, his breath warm against my lips. "But it's what you get with me. Complete, unwavering, obsessive devotion. I will destroy anyone who threatens you. I will burn down the world to keep you safe, and I will never, ever let you go. I hate you." The words came out weaker than I intended, nearly a whisper. "No, you don't." His thumb traced my lower lip, the touch feather-light but electrifying. "You hate that you don't hate me. You hate that some part of you understands why I did what I did. You hate that you're starting to feel safe here despite everything. Stop." I turned my face away, breaking the charged moment. "Just stop." He stepped back immediately, giving me space. When I looked at him again, his expression had returned to that careful neutrality he wore like armor. "We're late. The car is waiting." The drive to his mother's house passed in tense silence. I stared out the window, watching the city blur past, my mind reeling from Vincent's revelation. Everything I'd believed about my situation had been a lie. My father wasn't guilty. The marriage hadn't been a business transaction to settle a debt. It had been a calculated abduction, dressed up in legal paperwork and false accusations. And the worst part? Vincent didn't see anything wrong with what he'd done. The Salvatore family home was located in an exclusive neighborhood north of the city, a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa hidden behind tall stone walls and an iron gate. As we pulled up the circular driveway, I saw several other expensive cars already parked, the family gathering in full swing. "Listen to me carefully," Vincent said as Marco opened the car door. "My family can be intense. They'll have questions, make judgments, test you to see if you're worthy of being a Salvatore. Don't let them intimidate you. You're my wife. That makes you untouchable." "Like I'm untouchable to you?" I asked bitterly. His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond, simply offering his arm with a look that said refusing would be a mistake. I took it, hating myself for the way my body responded to even this simple touch. The strength in his forearm, the warmth of his body close to mine. The interior of the house was exactly what I'd expected. Opulent but tasteful, old-world elegance mixed with modern luxury. Voices drifted from somewhere deeper in the house. Laughter, animated conversation, the clink of glasses. Vincent led me through a foyer decorated with family portraits. Generations of Salvatores staring down at me with dark, judgmental eyes, and into a massive living room where at least a dozen people had gathered. Conversation stopped when we entered. Every eye in the room turned to assess me, and the weight of their collective scrutiny made my skin crawl. "Everyone," Vincent said, his hand warm on the small of my back, "I'd like you to meet my wife, Violet." A woman rose from a velvet sofa, petite, dark-haired, with Vincent's amber eyes and a bearing that screamed authority. "Finally," she said, crossing the room to stand before me. "I was beginning to think Vincent had invented you. I'm Carmela Salvatore, Vincent's mother." She looked me over with an intensity that rivaled her son's, taking in every detail from my dress to my shoes to the way I held myself under scrutiny. Then, surprisingly, she smiled and pulled me into an embrace that smelled of expensive perfume and something warmer, vanilla maybe, or cinnamon. "Welcome to the family, Violet," she murmured in my ear. "I hope my son has been treating you well." Before I could formulate a response, what could I say? "Your son kidnapped me?" She released me and began making introductions. Two younger versions of Vincent turned out to be his brothers, Dante and Luca, both devastatingly handsome in that same dangerous way. Marco was there, his scarred face less threatening in the context of family. Various cousins, uncles, and family associates were presented in a blur of names I'd never remember. Throughout it all, Vincent remained at my side, his hand never leaving the small of my back. The touch was possessive, yes, but also protective, as if he were shielding me from his family's assessment, even as he subjected me to it. Dinner was announced. and we moved to a dining room that made Vincent's penthouse table look modest. 20 people sat down to a meal of multiple courses, wine flowing freely, conversations overlapping in a cacophony of Italian and English that made my head spin. I picked at my food, hyper-aware of the glances sent my way, the whispered comments I couldn't quite hear. Carmela held court at the head of the table, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "So, Violet," she said during a lull in conversation, her voice carrying enough to draw everyone's attention. "Vincent tells me you want to be a nurse." All eyes turned to me again. I swallowed hard, setting down my fork. "Yes, I was accepted to nursing school before." I trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Before your son destroyed my life?" "Before she had to postpone her education." Vincent finished smoothly. "But she'll be starting next semester. I've already arranged her enrollment." I turned to stare at him, shocked. "You what?" "You wanted to go to nursing school," he said, as if this explained everything. "So you'll go. Northwestern has an excellent program. Classes start in January." "But I can't afford—" "I can." His gaze held mine, challenging me to argue in front of his family. "You're my wife. Your dreams are my responsibility now." Carmela's smile widened with approval. "How wonderful. We need more educated women in this family. Most of these boys," she waved dismissively at her sons and nephews, "think women should be content decorating homes and bearing children." "Not this boy," Vincent said quietly, his hand finding mine under the table. "Violet can be whatever she wants to be." "Except free," I thought bitterly. But I didn't say it. Couldn't say it with 20 pairs of Salvatore eyes watching our interaction with varying degrees of interest and speculation. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and careful conversations. By the time Vincent finally made our excuses to leave, exhaustion had settled into my bones like lead. The drive back to the penthouse was silent. I stared out the window, my mind churning with everything that had happened. Vincent had enrolled me in nursing school, had given me back the dream he'd taken away, as if that somehow absolved him of orchestrating my kidnapping. "You can't just make decisions about my life without consulting me," I said as we rode the elevator up to the penthouse. "I can, and I did." The elevator doors opened directly into his apartment. "You wanted to be a nurse. Now you can be. You're welcome." "That's not the point." I rounded on him, all the rage and confusion of the past 2 days finally boiling over. "You don't get to play God with my life, Vincent. You don't get to destroy everything I've built and then hand pieces back to me when you feel like being magnanimous." "What I did," he said, his voice dangerously low, "was give you an opportunity. A chance to pursue your education without working yourself to death in a diner, without worrying about how you'll pay rent or afford textbooks. I gave you security, protection, a future." "You gave me a cage," I shouted. "A gilded, luxurious cage where I can do anything I want as long as it's what you want me to do." "Then what do you want, Violet?" He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Tell me. What would make you happy? What would make this bearable for you?" "Freedom," I whispered. "I want my freedom back." "No." The word was absolute. "That's the one thing I can't give you. Won't give you. You're mine, Violet. Mine to protect, mine to care for, mine to— I am not yours." I shoved at his chest, in futile gesture that didn't budge him an inch. "I'm not a possession. I'm not a pet. I'm not—" His mouth crashed down on mine, cutting off my words. For one frozen moment, I was too shocked to react. Then instinct took over, but not the instinct I expected. Instead of fighting, instead of pulling away, I found myself kissing him back, with all the anger and fear and unwilling attraction I'd been suppressing for 2 days. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me against his hard body, and I tasted wine, and mint, and something darker, more dangerous, His hand tangled in my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss, and I made a sound that was embarrassingly close to a moan. Then reality crashed back. I pulled away, gasping, my lips swollen and my body trembling. No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to. I just did. His amber eyes burned with an intensity that stole my breath. And you kissed me back, Violet. Don't pretend you didn't. Shame and anger flooded through me in equal measure. That doesn't mean anything. It means everything. He stepped back, giving me space, but not releasing me from the trap of his gaze. It means you feel it too. This thing between us. You can hate what I did, how we started, but you can't deny the chemistry. Chemistry isn't enough, I said desperately. You can't build a marriage on attraction and control. Watch me. The certainty in his voice made my knees weak. I will spend every day of the rest of our lives proving to you that we belong together. That what I did, however wrong, led us to exactly where we're meant to be. I backed away until I felt the wall against my spine. You're insane. Probably. His smile was predatory, triumphant. But I'm your husband, and sooner or later, Violet O'Connor Salvatore, you're going to stop fighting what we both know is inevitable. He turned and walked away, leaving me trembling against the wall, my lips still tingling from his kiss, and my mind reeling from the impossible truth he'd forced me to confront. I was attracted to my captor, drawn to the man who'd orchestrated my abduction, responding to touch I should have despised. And the most terrifying part? Vincent knew it. He'd tasted my surrender in that kiss, felt my body's betrayal in the way I'd pressed against him. The war between us had shifted, transformed into something infinitely more dangerous. Because now I wasn't just fighting Vincent's control. I was fighting myself. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? With the memory of Vincent's kiss burning on my lips and the taste of my own surrender bitter on my tongue. I lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling as the city lights painted shifting shadows across the walls, and tried to understand what was happening to me. Stockholm Syndrome. That had to be it. Some psychological response to captivity that made me confuse fear and attraction, that twisted my survival instincts into something that felt dangerously close to desire. It was the only logical explanation for why my body had responded to Vincent's touch with such treacherous enthusiasm. By the time pale dawn light began filtering through the windows, I'd made a decision. I couldn't keep living in this emotional limbo, caught between hatred and unwilling attraction. I needed distance, boundaries, something to maintain the wall between captor and captive, that Vincent seemed determined to dismantle brick by brick. I emerged from my room at 7, fully dressed in my own jeans and Northwestern sweatshirt, armor against whatever game Vincent would play today. But the penthouse was empty, a note from Sophia on the kitchen counter informing me that Mr. Salvatore had left early for business meetings and wouldn't return until evening. The relief that flooded through me was mixed with something uncomfortably close to disappointment, which only reinforced my determination to establish boundaries. I couldn't afford to let my guard down, couldn't allow Vincent's calculated kindnesses, the nursing school enrollment, the protection of my family, the promise of dreams restored, to blind me to the fundamental truth. He'd stolen my life. I spent the day exploring the penthouse more thoroughly, mapping exits and security measures with the instinctive wariness of a prisoner planning escape. There were cameras, I discovered, discreetly positioned in every room except the bedrooms and bathrooms. The elevator required a key card to operate. The service entrance was monitored by guards I glimpsed through a hallway window. Even the emergency stairs were alarmed. Vincent had been truthful about one thing. This penthouse was a fortress. Getting out wouldn't be simple, but I had to try. Had to at least maintain the illusion of autonomy, even if it meant small rebellions like refusing to wear the clothes he'd bought or eating meals in my room instead of at his table. I needed these tiny assertions of will to remind myself that I was still Violet O'Connor, not just Mrs. Vincent Salvatore. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang. An unknown number, but I answered anyway, desperate for any connection to the outside world. Violet? Thank God. My father's voice, thick with emotion. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. Dad. I sank onto the sofa, tears pricking my eyes. I'm okay. I'm fine. Fine? His laugh was bitter. You're married to Vincent Salvatore, living in his penthouse like some kind of... He broke off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. This is my fault. All my fault. It's not your fault. The lie came automatically, even though we both knew the truth. If my father hadn't been falsely accused, I wouldn't be here. But what good would blame do now? Dad, I need you to listen to me. Vincent, he told me you didn't actually steal anything, that the accusation was false. Silence on the other end, then a choked sound that might have been a sob. I tried to tell them. I tried to explain, but no one would listen. And then they said if I agreed to the marriage, all charges would be dropped. You'd be protected. The family would be safe. What choice did I have? I know. And I did, even through my anger and hurt. My father had been trapped just as surely as I was, forced to choose between impossible options. I know, Dad. It's okay. It's not okay. His voice broke. My baby girl, sold to a monster because of lies I couldn't disprove. How is that ever going to be okay? I had no answer for that. We talked for a few more minutes, careful conversation that skirted around the edges of my new reality, before I heard voices in the background. My mother, asking if I was all right, if Vincent was treating me well, if I needed anything. Tell her I'm fine, I said, unable to bear actually speaking to her. My mother's grief would break whatever fragile composure I'd managed to construct. Tell her I love her. After we hung up, I sat in the too quiet penthouse and let myself cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but silent tears that tracked down my cheeks and dripped onto my hands folded in my lap. I cried for the future I'd lost, for the family torn apart by circumstances beyond our control, for the girl I'd been 6 months ago who'd believed the world was fundamentally fair. Violet. I jerked my head up to find Vincent standing in the doorway, still dressed in his business suit, his expression unreadable as he took in my tear-stained face. I hadn't heard him enter, hadn't heard the elevator or his footsteps. How long had he been standing there, watching me fall apart? How much of that did you hear? I demanded, swiping angrily at my cheeks. Enough. He crossed the room with that predatory grace, producing a handkerchief from his pocket and offering it to me. When I didn't take it, he knelt before me and gently wiped the tears from my face himself, his touch surprisingly tender. Your father called. And you monitored the call, naturally. I pulled away from his touch. Because God forbid I have a private conversation. I monitor everything that could be a security risk, he said calmly, pocketing the handkerchief, including calls from numbers that could be traced, used against you, weaponized by my enemies. Your enemies, I laughed bitterly. How convenient that your paranoia gives you permission to invade every aspect of my life. It's not paranoia if people are actually trying to kill you. He settled onto the sofa beside me. Too close. Always too close. I have 3 rival families who would love nothing more than to hurt me through you. The Bratva, the Irish mob, the Colombians. All of them have made it clear they see my wife as a viable target. The casual way he discussed threats on my life made my blood run cold. Then, maybe you should have thought of that before forcing me into this marriage. I did think of it. His amber eyes held mine with uncomfortable intensity. I thought about every possible consequence, every risk, every complication. And I decided you were worth it. Worth the danger. Worth the complications. worth starting a war if necessary to keep you safe. I didn't ask for your protection, I said, but the words came out weaker than intended. No, you asked for your freedom. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, in a gesture so casual it should have been meaningless, but somehow felt devastatingly intimate. But freedom in my world means vulnerability. It means exposure to enemies who would use you to destroy me. I can't give you that, Violet. I won't. So I'm just supposed to accept this? Accept being your prisoner for the rest of my life? Accept being my wife, he corrected. There's a difference, even if you refuse to see it. Before I could formulate a response, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening in a way that made apprehension coil in my stomach. What is it? I asked. A problem. He stood, already moving toward his office. Stay here. Don't leave the penthouse for any reason. Marco is posting additional security outside. Vincent. He turned back, and the look in his eyes made me understand, perhaps for the first time, exactly who and what Vincent Salvatore was. Not just a man who'd orchestrated my abduction, but a predator at the top of a violent food chain, someone accustomed to wielding life and death with casual authority. I mean it, Violet. Whatever happens, you stay inside until I tell you otherwise. Understood? I nodded mutely, and he disappeared into his office, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded ominous. For the next 2 hours, I paced the penthouse like a caged animal, my anxiety growing with each passing minute. I could hear Vincent's voice through his office door, low, controlled, but with an edge that made me shiver. Occasionally, other voices joined his, Marco's distinctive rasp, other men I didn't recognize. Something was happening, something bad, and I was trapped here without information or agency. Finally, unable to stand the isolation any longer, I approached Vincent's office and knocked softly. Not now, came his curt response. Vincent, please, I need to know what's happening. Silence, then footsteps. The door opened to reveal Vincent with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Behind him, I glimpsed Marco and 2 other men hunched over a laptop, their faces grim. Someone tried to breach the building's security 30 minutes ago, Vincent said without preamble. 2 men, armed, claiming to be maintenance workers. They were stopped at the lobby level, but their target was clearly this penthouse. My legs went weak. The Bratva? Probably. We're still determining their affiliation. His jaw tightened. This is why I need you to understand, Violet. This isn't paranoia. The danger is real. Are they... Did you... I couldn't finish the question. Couldn't quite voice my horror at what might have happened to 2 men who'd come looking for me. They're being questioned, Vincent said, which wasn't really an answer but told me everything I needed to know. Go back to your room, lock the door. I'll come get you when it's safe. When will that be? The question came out smaller than I'd intended, revealing the fear I'd been trying to hide. Something in his expression softened. He stepped into the hallway, closing the office door behind him, and pulled me into his arms before I could protest. I should have fought, should have maintained my distance, but the solid warmth of his body and the steady thump of his heartbeat beneath my ear were too comforting to resist. I won't let anyone hurt you, he murmured into my hair. I swear it, Violet. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, you will be safe. You can't promise that, I whispered against his chest. You can't control everything. Watch me. His arms tightened around me. I've built an empire on controlling the uncontrollable, and you... He tilted my face up to meet his gaze. You're the most precious thing in that empire. I will burn this entire city down before I let anyone take you from me. The possessive intensity in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it ignited something dark and treacherous in my core, a response I was becoming increasingly unable to deny. I hated that he made me feel safe, even as he held me captive. Hated that his touch calmed the anxiety his world had created. Hated that I was beginning to understand the twisted logic of his obsession. "I need to get back," he said, releasing me with obvious reluctance. "But Violet?" He caught my hand as I turned away. "Promise me you'll stay inside. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you don't leave this penthouse until I say it's clear." "I promise." He studied me for a long moment, as if weighing the sincerity of my words, then nodded and returned to his office. I stood in the hallway for several seconds, my hand still tingling from his touch, before retreating to my room as instructed. The hours that followed were some of the longest of my life. I tried to read, to watch television, to do anything that would distract me from the knowledge that men had tried to break into the building to get to me. That somewhere below, those men were probably being tortured for information by Vincent's people. That my very existence as Vincent Salvatore's wife had painted a target on my back. Night fell, the city lights flickering to life below like a galaxy of false stars. I'd given up on sleep, was sitting by the window watching the distant movement of traffic, when my door opened. Vincent stood in the doorway, still dressed in his wrinkled shirt and slacks, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. "It's over," he said simply. "The threat has been neutralized." I wanted to ask what that meant, what had happened to the men who'd tried to breach our security, but I wasn't sure I could handle the answer. "Come here," Vincent said, and something in his voice, not command but request, made me rise and cross to him. He pulled me into his arms again, and this time I didn't resist, didn't try to maintain distance. His body trembled slightly, a barely perceptible shudder that revealed more than words ever could. He'd been afraid, not for himself, but for me. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, his lips against my hair. "About that day I first saw you, about why I couldn't let you go." I pulled back enough to see his face, surprised by the vulnerability I glimpsed there. "Vincent, my father was killed 6 years ago," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Shot in the street like an animal by the Bratva, who wanted to take over his territory. I was 25, completely unprepared to lead, but I had no choice. It was step up or watch everything he'd built crumble. I knew some of this. His father's death had made the news, though the official story had been a botched robbery. But hearing Vincent speak of it, the loss naked in his voice, made it real in a way headlines never had. For 6 years I've done nothing but fight, he said. Fight to maintain control, to protect my family, to prove I was worthy of my father's legacy. I became hard, ruthless. I stopped seeing people as anything more than assets or threats. And then I saw you. His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You were serving coffee, smiling at customers, treating everyone with kindness even though you were clearly exhausted. And something in me just broke. Or maybe it was fixed. I don't know. But I looked at you and thought, that's what I've been missing. That's what could make all of this bearable. So you orchestrated my kidnapping, I said, trying to hold on to my anger, even as his words undermined my defenses. I gave you a choice. Your father was going to be arrested anyway. The evidence against him was fabricated, yes, but it would have held up in court. He'd have gone to prison, probably for 10 years. Your family would have been destroyed financially and socially. Your mother would have lost everything. His eyes held mine, unflinching. I offered an alternative. Marry me, and all charges disappear. Your family stays intact, protected by my name. You get the life and education you've always dreamed of. All you have to give up is your freedom. All I have to give up, I repeated incredulously. You say that like it's nothing. It's not nothing, he agreed. It's everything. your autonomy, your ability to make choices, your sense of control over your own life. I took all of that from you, Violet, and I'd do it again, because the alternative, you out there, vulnerable, accessible to anyone who wanted to hurt me, was unacceptable. The brutal honesty of his confession should have made me hate him more. Instead, it made me see him clearly for the first time. Not a monster, not a savior, but a deeply damaged man who'd confused possession with protection, obsession with devotion. You can't love me, I said softly. You don't even know me. I know you work yourself to exhaustion to help your family. I know you put everyone else's needs before your own. I know you're strong enough to face down a room full of criminals without flinching. I know you taste like honey and rage when I kiss you. His thumb traced my lower lip, sending an unwelcome shiver through me. And I know that I will spend the rest of my life learning everything else there is to know about you. This is insane, I whispered, but the words lacked conviction. Probably. His smile was self-deprecating. But it's what we have. And I'm asking you, Violet, not ordering, but asking, to give this a real chance. Give us a real chance. Stop fighting what's already inevitable, and see if we can build something genuine from this fucked up beginning. And if I say no, then I'll wait. His expression was utterly serious. I'll give you space, time, whatever you need, but I won't let you go. Can't let you go. You're mine, Violet, for better or worse. I should have said no, should have maintained my boundaries, kept fighting his claim on me. But standing there in his arms, with the memory of men trying to breach our security still fresh and Vincent's vulnerability finally visible, I found I couldn't. One condition, I heard myself say. You start being honest with me, about your business, about the dangers, about everything. No more treating me like a child who needs to be protected from reality. His eyes widened slightly, surprise evident. You want to know about my work? I'm living in your world now, whether I like it or not. I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze directly. I deserve to understand what that means. What you do, who your enemies are, what threats we're facing. All of it. For a long moment he studied me, some internal debate playing out behind his eyes. Then slowly, he nodded. Okay. But not tonight. Tonight, I just want to hold you and be grateful you're safe. He led me to the sofa, pulling me down beside him and arranging us so my head rested on his chest. It should have felt wrong, being held by my captor, seeking comfort from the man who'd stolen my freedom. But in that moment, with Vincent's heart beating steadily beneath my ear and his arms solid around me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Safe. Tell me about nursing school, he said quietly. What kind of nurse do you want to be? And so I did, talking into the quiet darkness about my dreams of working in pediatrics, of helping children who'd been dealt unfair hands by life. Vincent listened without interrupting, occasionally asking questions that revealed he was genuinely interested, not just humoring me. Hours passed. At some point, I dozed off, exhaustion finally claiming me. When I woke, dawn was painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and I was still curled against Vincent's chest, his arms wrapped protectively around me, his breathing deep and even with sleep. I should have moved, should have retreated to my room, maintained the distance that was rapidly eroding. Instead, I stayed where I was, letting myself have this moment of stolen peace before reality reasserted itself. Because the truth was becoming impossible to deny. I was falling for my captor, not despite his obsession and control, but perhaps because of the twisted devotion underlying it. Vincent Salvatore was dangerous, ruthless, and utterly wrong for me in every conceivable way. And yet, When he looked at me with those amber eyes full of fierce possessiveness and vulnerable longing, I found myself wanting to surrender to the inevitable. The war between us wasn't over, but the battle lines were shifting, transforming into something infinitely more complicated than captor and captive. Something that might, against all odds, become real. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo of domestic routine and simmering tension. True to his word, Vincent began including me in discussions about his business. Carefully edited versions, perhaps, but more than I'd expected. I learned about legitimate enterprises he was trying to expand, about territorial disputes with rival families, about the complex web of alliances and betrayals that governed his world. It was terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. I also started attending classes at Northwestern. Vincent had enrolled me in an accelerated program that would allow me to complete prerequisites I'd missed during my forced hiatus. Marco drove me to campus each morning, waiting in the parking lot with 2 other guards, while I attended lectures on anatomy and pharmacology. It should have felt suffocating, but after the attempted breach 3 weeks ago, I'd stopped resenting the protection. My classmates assumed I was just another wealthy student with a driver. They didn't know my husband ran half of Chicago's criminal underworld, didn't know the diamond on my finger represented ownership as much as marriage. I let them believe the lie, grateful for these few hours each day where I could pretend to be normal. But at night, I returned to the penthouse and to Vincent, and normal became an impossible fantasy. "You're distracted," he observed one evening as we shared dinner, a ritual that had become less confrontational and more comfortable, dangerously comfortable. "Bad day at school?" I set down my fork, considering whether to share what had been bothering me. In the past 3 weeks, our relationship had shifted into something I didn't quite know how to define. Not love, certainly not yet, but a tentative partnership built on brutal honesty and grudging respect. "I made a friend," I said finally. "Her name is Rebecca. She's in most of my classes, and she invited me to a study group this weekend." Vincent's expression remained neutral, but I'd learned to read the subtle tension in his shoulders. "And you want to go?" "Yes." I met his gaze directly. "It would help with my coursework, and it would be nice to have something normal in my life. Something that's just mine. Where is this study group meeting?" "The campus library, Saturday afternoon, 2 to 5. He was silent for a long moment, his amber eyes assessing. "Marco will drive you and wait outside. You keep your phone on and charged. And you text me every hour to check in." Relief flooded through me. I'd expected an outright refusal. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, Violet." His voice carried an edge I'd come to recognize as carefully controlled possessiveness. "I'm not being generous. I'm compromising. There's a difference." "I know." And I did. Every concession Vincent made came with conditions, with safeguards, with the implicit understanding that my safety, his definition of safety, superseded my autonomy. But I still appreciate it. Something softened in his expression. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "You're changing me, you know, making me question instincts I've relied on for years. I don't know if that's good or dangerous." "Maybe both," I suggested, my thumb unconsciously stroking the back of his hand. When had casual touch become so natural between us? When had I stopped flinching from his proximity and started leaning into it? His phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. Vincent glanced at it, his expression darkening. "I need to take this." He rose and moved to his office, leaving me alone with my confused thoughts. The Vincent I'd feared 3 weeks ago, the cold, controlling man who'd orchestrated my abduction, was still there beneath the surface. But increasingly, I glimpsed someone else. A man burdened by responsibility he hadn't asked for, trying to protect what mattered to him in the only way he knew how. It didn't excuse what he'd done, didn't make our beginning any less wrong. but it made him human in a way I'd been resisting acknowledging. I was clearing our plates when raised voices erupted from Vincent's office. Not quite shouting, but definitely arguing. I moved closer to the door, knowing I shouldn't eavesdrop but unable to stop myself. "Absolutely not," Vincent was saying, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I don't care what the Russians are offering. We don't negotiate with people who tried to break into my home." A pause, then. "Because she's my wife, Marco." "My wife? They threatened her. And you think I should sit down and discuss terms like nothing happened?" Another pause. Longer this time. When Vincent spoke again, his voice had dropped to something deadly and cold. "Tell Petrov he has 24 hours to leave Chicago voluntarily, or I'll bury him in the same hole where I put the last 2 idiots he sent after Violet. And Marco, make sure he understands I'm not bluffing." Ice flooded my veins. I backed away from the door just as it opened, nearly colliding with Vincent. His expression was thunderous, but when he saw me, saw the fear I couldn't quite hide, something shifted. "You heard," he said flatly. "Some of it." I wrapped my arms around myself. "You're going to kill someone. Only if necessary." He reached for me, but I stepped back. Hurt flashed across his face before his mask of control slammed back into place. "Violet, I knew what you were," I said, my voice shaking. "I've known from the beginning. But hearing you discuss murder so casually..." I broke off, unable to finish. "What did you expect?" The hardness in his voice made me flinch. "You asked for honesty about my world. This is it. Sometimes violence is the only language my enemies understand. There has to be another way." "There isn't." He moved closer, and this time I didn't retreat. "The man who tried to breach our security 3 weeks ago, he's given me no choice. He's continued to probe for weaknesses, to threaten retaliation, to make it clear he sees you as a viable target. I can either eliminate the threat permanently, or I can wait for him to succeed in killing you. Which option would you prefer?" Put that way, my moral objections felt naive and childish. But I couldn't let go of the fundamental wrongness of taking a life, even to protect my own. "I don't know how to reconcile this," I admitted. "The Vincent who holds me at night, who supports my dreams, who makes me feel safe, and the Vincent who orders executions without hesitation. How can you be both?" "Because I have to be." His hands came up to frame my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. "The man who holds you at night exists because the other Vincent keeps you alive. I don't have the luxury of being only one or the other. Not in my world." "Then maybe your world is wrong." "Maybe it is." His thumb traced my cheekbone in that gesture that always made my breath catch. "But it's the world we live in. The world you're part of now. And I need you to understand, Violet. I will always choose your safety over my own morality. Every single time." The certainty in his voice was both terrifying and intoxicating. No one had ever been willing to damn themselves for my sake before. No one had ever looked at me with such fierce, unwavering devotion. It made me want to surrender completely, to stop fighting the inevitable pull between us. And that terrified me more than anything. "I need time," I said, pulling away from his touch. "I need to think." He let me go, but his eyes tracked me as I fled to my room. I locked the door, that symbolic barrier we'd maintained even as every other wall between us crumbled and sank onto the bed. My phone buzzed. A text from Vincent. "I'm sorry you had to hear that, but I'm not sorry for protecting you. I never will be." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could I say? That I understood his logic even as I rejected his methods. That part of me was grateful for his ruthless protection, even as another part recoiled from the violence. In the end, I didn't respond. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, but my dreams were haunted by amber eyes and the weight of moral compromises I wasn't ready to make. Saturday arrived wrapped in unseasonable warmth for October. I dressed carefully for the study group, choosing jeans and a Northwestern hoodie that would help me blend in with other students. Vincent was in a meeting when I left, but he'd texted detailed instructions. Marco would drive me, wait in the parking lot, and retrieve me precisely at 5. I was to text every hour and call immediately if anything seemed wrong. The library was crowded with students preparing for midterms. Rebecca waved me over to a table where 3 other students, 2 women and a man, had already spread out textbooks and laptops. "Violet, you made it!" Rebecca's enthusiasm was infectious. She was petite and energetic, with curly red hair and a smile that never seemed to fade. "Everyone, this is Violet. She's in our anatomy class. Violet, this is Sarah, Jennifer, and Marcus." I settled into the group, grateful for the normalcy of discussing exam questions and comparing notes. For 3 hours, I was just another nursing student struggling with Latin terminology and complex physiological systems. No guards, no danger, no moral compromises. It was the most freedom I'd experienced since marrying Vincent. At 4:30, as I was gathering my things to leave, Marcus asked if I wanted to grab coffee with the group. "Oh, I can't," I said automatically. "I have to get home." "Come on, just 30 minutes, Rebecca urged. "There's a great cafe right off campus. We could continue reviewing the cardiovascular system." I hesitated, my phone heavy in my pocket. Vincent expected me to leave at 5. But 30 minutes wouldn't matter, would it? And I'd text him, explain I was staying a bit longer with friends. He'd understand. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Just 30 minutes." The cafe was charming. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, the smell of fresh ground coffee and baking pastries. We claimed a corner table, and conversation flowed easily from school to life to dreams for the future. Marcus was funny, Rebecca was kind, and for 45 blessed minutes, I forgot about the complicated reality waiting for me at the penthouse. It wasn't until 5:30, an hour and a half past my scheduled departure, that I remembered to check my phone. 12 missed calls from Vincent, 8 from Marco, 20 text messages, progressing from concerned to frantic to coldly furious. "Where are you?" "Violet, answer your phone. Marco says you left the library. Where the hell are you? If you don't respond in the next 5 minutes, I'm locking down the entire campus." My hands shook as I read through the messages, each one evidence of Vincent's escalating panic. The last message, sent 3 minutes ago, made my blood run cold. "I'm coming to get you myself. And when I find you, we're going to have a serious discussion about what happens when you break the rules." "I have to go," I said abruptly, standing so quickly I nearly knocked over my coffee. "I'm sorry, I completely lost track of time. Is everything okay?" Rebecca's concern was genuine. "You look really pale." "I'm fine. Family emergency. I'll see you in class Monday." I fled the cafe, my heart hammering. Outside, I searched frantically for Marco's SUV, but the parking lot was empty of familiar vehicles. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and called Vincent. He answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" Each word was precisely enunciated, vibrating with barely controlled rage. "I'm at a cafe near campus. I'm so sorry, I lost track of time. Do you have any idea what the past hour has been like?" His voice was deadly quiet, more frightening than shouting. "I thought they'd taken you. I thought I'd failed to protect you. I thought—" He broke off, and I heard him take a deep breath. "Stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. Marco is 2 minutes away." The line went dead. I stood on the sidewalk, shame and defiance warring in my chest. Yes, I'd lost track of time. Yes, I should have texted. But his reaction was excessive, controlling. Exactly the kind of suffocating oversight I'd been trying to escape. Marco's SUV screeched to a stop in front of me less than a minute later. He jumped out, his scarred face tight with an emotion I'd never seen before. Fear. "Get in," he said tersely. "Boss is waiting." The drive back to the penthouse was silent and tense. Marco's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, and twice I caught him glancing at me in the rearview mirror with something like sympathy. "He's really angry, isn't he?" I said quietly. "Angry doesn't begin to cover it, Mrs. Salvatore." Marco's voice was surprisingly gentle. "In the 15 years I've known Vincent, I've never seen him lose control like he did today. He had men searching every building on campus. He was ready to call in the FBI. He was—" Marco shook his head. "Just be prepared." The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like ascending to my execution. When the doors opened, Vincent was waiting. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. His shirt was untucked, his tie missing, and his eyes, those amber eyes I'd come to know in all their moods, burned with a fury so intense it stole my breath. "Out," he said to Marco without looking away from me. Marco retreated hastily, the elevator doors closing behind him with ominous finality. For a long moment, Vincent just stared at me, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Do you have any idea what you put me through?" "I lost track of time," I said, finding my voice. "I'm sorry. I should have texted." "Lost track of time." He laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "You lost track of time while I imagined your corpse in a ditch somewhere. While I mobilized every resource I have to find you. While I prepared to declare war on anyone who might have taken you. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" His control finally snapped. "2 weeks ago, armed men tried to break into this building to get to you. Do you remember that? Violet, do you remember why we have security protocols?" "Of course I remember, but nothing." He stalked toward me, and I instinctively backed up until my spine hit the wall. He stopped inches away, caging me with his arms but not touching me. "You agreed to check in. You agreed to text me. You agreed to leave when you said you would. Those weren't suggestions, Violet. They were conditions for allowing you the freedom you demanded. I'm not a child who needs permission. You're my wife who needs protection." His fist slammed into the wall beside my head, making me flinch. "Do you understand what would have happened if they'd found you alone? If they'd taken you while my men were searching campus?" Tears blurred my vision, anger and shame mixing in toxic combination. I was just having coffee with friends. Normal, boring coffee. Something I should be allowed to do without... Without what? He leaned closer, his breath hot against my face. "Without considering that your safety is more important than your coffee date? Without remembering that people want to hurt you to get to me?" "I hate this," I whispered. "I hate that I can't have anything normal. I hate that every moment of my life is monitored and controlled. I hate that I can't even grab coffee with classmates without triggering a manhunt." Something in his expression shifted, fury giving way to something more raw. "And I hate that my world has made you a target. I hate that protecting you requires suffocating you. I hate that every time you walk out that door, I have to live with the possibility that you won't come back." His hand came up to cup my face, his touch gentle despite the storm in his eyes. "But I'll take your hatred, Violet, as long as you're alive to hate me." The broken sincerity in his voice cracked something in my chest. I could see it now, the terror beneath his rage, the love beneath his control. Vincent Salvatore, who commanded an empire with ruthless efficiency, had spent 90 minutes believing he'd lost the one thing that mattered more than power, or wealth, or legacy. Me. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it this time. "I should have texted, should have called. I wasn't thinking about... His mouth crashed down on mine, cutting off my apology. This kiss was different from the one 3 weeks ago. Less calculated, more desperate. His hands tangled in my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss, and I tasted fear and relief and possessive need on his lips. I kissed him back with equal desperation, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. All the anger and fear and confused feelings I'd been suppressing poured into that kiss, and when we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, something fundamental had shifted between us. "Don't ever scare me like that again," he whispered against my lips. "I can survive anything except losing you." "I won't," I promised. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He rested his forehead against mine, his hands still trembling as they framed my face. "I love you, Violet. I know you're not ready to hear it, not ready to say it back. But I need you to know. Everything I do, every restriction I place, every precaution I take, it all comes from that. From loving you so much it terrifies me." My heart stuttered in my chest. This was the moment, the crossroads. I could maintain my distance, insist that Stockholm Syndrome and real love were different things. Or I could acknowledge the truth that had been growing undeniable for weeks. "I think," I started, then stopped, gathering courage. "I think I'm falling in love with you too, even though I shouldn't. Even though it's probably insane." His smile was brilliant, transforming his face from harsh to beautiful. "It's definitely insane, but I'll take it." He kissed me again, softer this time, tender rather than desperate. And as his hands traced gentle patterns on my back, as my fingers threaded through his hair, I finally stopped fighting the inevitable. Vincent Salvatore was dangerous and possessive, and had stolen my freedom in the most unforgivable way. But he was also devoted and protective, and loved me with an intensity I'd never experienced. And God help me, I loved him back. The war between us was finally over. Now came the harder part, building a real marriage from the ashes of our terrible beginning. 3 years later, I stood in the nursery of our new home, a sprawling estate north of the city that Vincent had purchased when I'd told him I was pregnant, and marveled at how completely my life had transformed. The room was painted a soft sage green, filled with natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked gardens I'd designed myself. A hand-carved crib stood against one wall, waiting for the daughter who would arrive in just 6 weeks. On the dresser sat my nursing degree, framed alongside a photo from my graduation. Vincent's arm around my waist, his smile so proud it had made me cry. So much had changed. So much had been fought for, negotiated, rebuilt from the broken foundation of our beginning. "There you are." Vincent's voice came from the doorway, warm with affection. He'd changed from his business suit into jeans and a soft sweater, his feet bare, a casual domesticity that still sometimes caught me by surprise. "I've been looking for you." I turned to face him, my hand resting on the swell of my stomach, where our daughter performed her evening gymnastics routine. "Just imagining what it'll be like when she's here." He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his hands covering mine over our baby. Terrifying and perfect, probably. "Like everything with us," I said, leaning back against his solid warmth. The past 3 years hadn't been easy. We'd fought, God, how we'd fought. About his work, about my independence, about the balance between protection and suffocation. But we'd also learned to compromise, to communicate, to build something real from the twisted beginning that could have destroyed us. Vincent had been true to his word about my nursing education. I'd completed my degree with his full support, attending classes under Marco's watchful eye, but with increasing freedom as the immediate threats diminished. Vincent's decisive handling of the Bratva situation, I'd never asked for details, had learned there were some things I was happier not knowing, had established clear boundaries with his rivals. They'd learned that targeting his wife brought consequences too severe to risk. After graduation, I'd started working at a pediatric clinic in an underserved neighborhood. Vincent had wanted to buy me a position at a prestigious hospital, but I'd insisted on earning my place through merit. We'd compromised. I worked at the clinic I'd chosen, but with security measures neither of us could compromise on. 2 guards in the parking lot, secure transport, and a panic button I wore as a necklace. It was still more freedom than I'd had in those first terrible weeks. "I have something for you," Vincent said, pressing a kiss to my neck. "A graduation gift, though I know I'm 3 years late." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and my heart stuttered. We'd exchanged gifts before. He was generous to a fault, constantly showering me with things I didn't need. But something about the velvet box felt significant. Inside was a key, simple and silver, attached to a keychain with coordinates engraved on it. "What is this?" I asked, turning it over in my hand. "Coordinates to a property I purchased in your name, completely separate from my businesses, held in a trust that only you control." His arms tightened around me. "It's in Montana, 30 acres with a small house, remote enough to be private, but close enough to a town for supplies." Understanding dawned slowly. "An escape route. An option," he corrected gently. "I told you 3 years ago that I'd never let you go, and I meant it. But I also recognize that I took your choices away. This is me giving one back. If you ever feel unsafe, if something happens to me, if you just need space, you have somewhere that's entirely yours. My empire can't touch it. My enemies don't know about it. It's your sanctuary." Tears blurred my vision. This gift, this acknowledgement of my autonomy, this recognition that I might need an escape even from him, meant more than any jewelry or expensive car ever could. "I won't need it," I said, turning in his arms to face him. "I choose to be here, Vincent. Every day, I choose this. Choose us." "I know." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb wiping away the tears tracking down my cheeks. "But I need you to have the choice. Need to know that you stay because you want to, not because you have nowhere else to go." I rose on my toes and kissed him, pouring 3 years of hard-won love and trust into the gesture. His arms tightened around me, as much as my pregnant belly would allow, and I felt our daughter kick in protest at being squished between us. "She's going to be just as stubborn as her mother," Vincent murmured against my lips. "God help you if she inherits your controlling tendencies." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "God help us both." My phone buzzed with an incoming call. My mother, her weekly check-in. In the 3 years since my marriage, my relationship with my parents had slowly healed. Vincent had proven himself through actions rather than words, quietly paying off their mortgage, ensuring my father got a foreman position at a legitimate construction company Vincent owned, including them in family dinners and holidays. They'd never fully forgive him for how we'd started, but they'd learned to love the man I'd married, to see beyond the criminal to the devoted husband and soon-to-be father. "I should take this," I said, and Vincent nodded, pressing one more kiss to my forehead before leaving me to my conversation. "Hi, Mom," I answered, moving to the window seat that had become my favorite spot in the nursery. "Violet, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Is the baby moving?" We talked for 20 minutes, the easy conversation of mother and daughter planning for a grandchild's arrival. She wanted to know about the nursery, about my doctor's appointments, about Vincent's increasing protectiveness as my due date approached. "He's driving me crazy," I admitted, though affection colored my voice. "He's hired a second on-call obstetrician, installed cameras in every room, and I'm pretty sure he's considering bubble wrapping the entire house." My mother's laugh was warm. "That's love, baby. Excessive, overbearing, absolutely infuriating love. Your father was the same way when I was pregnant with you. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, watching the sun set over the gardens. Our daughter kicked, strong, insistent movements that reminded me she was real, that the future Vincent and I were building together would soon include a tiny person who'd depend on us completely. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I'd spent the past 3 years learning to navigate Vincent's world, understanding the legitimate businesses he was building, real estate development, construction, import-export operations that were actually legal, while remaining carefully ignorant of the activities that still existed in the shadows. He'd been true to his word about honoring my moral boundaries. I didn't ask about the violence, and he didn't bring it into our home. But I wasn't naive. I knew what Vincent was capable of, what he'd done and might do again to protect our family. I'd made peace with loving a man who existed in moral gray areas I'd once seen as absolute black. "Dinner's ready," Sophia called from the doorway. She'd remained as Vincent's household manager, though her stern demeanor had softened over the years. She was almost grandmotherly now, constantly fussing over my pregnancy and offering unsolicited advice about childcare. Vincent was waiting in the dining room, but we'd long since abandoned the formal meals of those early weeks. Now we ate at the kitchen island, comfortable and casual, discussing our days like any normal couple. Except we weren't normal, and never would be. "I had an interesting conversation with Dante today," Vincent said as we ate the pasta Sophia had prepared. His younger brother had become a close friend over the years, his irreverent humor a counterpoint to Vincent's intensity. "He wants to know if you'll talk to his new girlfriend. Apparently she's having trouble adjusting to the family." I raised an eyebrow. "Is she being held hostage like I was?" "Violet, I'm kidding. Mostly. Tell Dante to have her call me. I remember what it's like to be the outsider trying to understand this world." Vincent's expression grew serious. "Do you ever regret it? How we started?" It wasn't the first time he'd asked, and probably wouldn't be the last. Some guilt ran too deep to ever fully heal. "I regret that I didn't have a choice," I answered honestly. "I regret the fear and anger and feeling of powerlessness. But do I regret where we ended up? No, not anymore." "Not anymore," he repeated, catching the qualification. "There are still days when I wonder what my life would have been like if we'd met differently, if you'd asked me out like a normal person instead of orchestrating my abduction." I set down my fork, meeting his gaze directly. "But then I think about everything we've built together. The clinic where I work, the family we're creating, the way you've changed your business to be more legitimate. And I realize that maybe we needed the terrible beginning to forge something strong enough to survive." "You've changed me," Vincent said quietly. "Made me want to be better, even when better doesn't come naturally. You've changed me too. Made me stronger, braver. Taught me that the world isn't as simple as I once thought." I reached across the island to take his hand. "We're not the people we were 3 years ago, Vincent. We're better. Together." After dinner, we walked through the gardens in the cooling evening air. Vincent's arm around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest. The estate was beautiful. Carefully landscaped grounds. A guest house for my parents when they visited. Space for the children we hoped to have. It was everything I'd never dared to dream of in those early, terrifying days. "I'm scared," I admitted suddenly. "About the baby. About being a mother. About bringing a child into your world." Vincent stopped walking, turning me to face him. "I'm terrified," he said. "Absolutely terrified of failing her, of my world touching her, of not being the father she deserves. But we'll figure it out together, Violet, just like we've figured out everything else. Promise me something," I said. "Promise me she'll have choices. Real choices, not the illusion of them. Promise me we'll protect her without suffocating her." I promised to try. His hands cradled my face with infinite gentleness. And I promise that if I fail, when I fail, because I will, you'll call me on it. You'll fight me like you've always fought me, and together we'll find the balance. I believed him, not because he was perfect, but because he'd proven over 3 years that his love was real, that his commitment to growth was genuine, that the man who'd stolen my freedom could also cherish the autonomy he'd once trampled. 6 weeks later, I went into labor at 3 a.m. Vincent transformed into a focused, controlled version of his usual self, exactly what I needed as contractions tore through me. He held my hand through 12 hours of labor, never leaving my side despite his obvious terror. When our daughter finally arrived, small and perfect, and screaming her outrage at being forced into the world, I watched Vincent hold her for the first time and saw tears track down his face. "She's beautiful," he whispered, his finger stroking her tiny cheek. "She's perfect." "What should we name her?" I asked, exhausted and elated in equal measure. We'd discussed names for months but hadn't decided. Now, watching Vincent cradle our daughter with such tender wonder, I knew exactly what felt right. "Hope," I said. "Her name is Hope." Vincent looked up at me, understanding dawning in his amber eyes. Hope, for the future we were building, for the family we'd created from impossible beginnings, for the love that had survived everything and emerged stronger. "Hope Salvatore," he said, testing it. Then, looking back at our daughter, "Hello, Hope. I'm your daddy, and I love you more than anything in this world. You and your mother, you're everything to me." I watched them together, my husband and our daughter, this man who'd once stolen my freedom now devoted to protecting hers. And I finally understood something important. Love wasn't simple. It wasn't always healthy or balanced or born from ideal circumstances. Sometimes it grew in the darkest places, forged by impossible situations and sustained by difficult compromises. But it was still love. Real, complicated, imperfect love. And it was ours. 3 months after Hope's birth, I returned to work at the clinic part-time. Vincent had wanted me to take a full year of maternity leave, but I'd needed the connection to my career, my identity beyond mother and wife. We'd compromised, as we always did now. 3 days a week at the clinic with a nanny Vincent had vetted extensively in security measures that made me roll my eyes but that I no longer fought. On Hope's first birthday, Vincent gathered the extended Salvatore family for a celebration that was both intimate and overwhelming. My parents were there, comfortable now in a world they'd once found terrifying. Vincent's brothers doted on Hope, and Carmela had transformed into the quintessential Italian grandmother, constantly trying to feed everyone. I watched Vincent across the lawn, Hope balanced on his hip as he talked with Dante. Our daughter's laugh, pure joy, rang out, and I saw Vincent's expression soften in that way reserved only for her. "You did good, kiddo," my father said, appearing at my elbow. He still called me that, even though I was now 25 and a mother myself. "I know the beginning was rough, but you've built something real with him." "We built it together," I corrected. "It wasn't easy, and it's still not perfect, but it's ours." He nodded, understanding in his weathered face. "That's all any of us can hope for. Something real, something worth fighting for. You found that with Vincent, even if the path was twisted." Later that night, after the party had ended and Hope was asleep in her crib, Vincent and I stood on the balcony of our bedroom, looking out at the moonlit gardens. "Happy?" he asked, his arms wrapped around me from behind. "Incredibly," I answered honestly. 3 years ago, if you'd told me I'd be here, married to you, with a daughter, genuinely content, I would have called you insane. And now? Now I know that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the darkest soil. I turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Vincent Salvatore, despite everything." Because of everything. You're my husband, Hope's father, my partner in this complicated life we're building. I love you, Violet. He kissed me softly, tenderly. Thank you for giving us a chance, for seeing past the monster to the man underneath. You were never a monster, I corrected. Just a man who loved me in the only way he knew how. We learned better together. As we stood there in the moonlight, I thought about the girl I'd been 3 years ago. Frightened, angry, trapped in a marriage she'd never wanted. And I thought about the woman I'd become. Stronger, wiser, loved beyond measure. The path between those two versions of myself hadn't been easy. It had been filled with fear and anger, with moral compromises and difficult truths. But it had also been filled with growth and understanding, with a love that had survived the worst beginning imaginable and emerged as something genuine. Vincent had stolen my freedom, yes. But in return, he'd given me a different kind of liberation. From loneliness, from purposelessness, from the small, safe life I'd been living. He'd given me a family, a future, a love fierce enough to burn through every obstacle. And I'd given him the same thing. A reason to be better, a family worth protecting, a love worth fighting for. Together, we'd built something impossible, a real marriage from the ashes of an unforgivable beginning. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd once dreamed of. It was better, more complicated, more honest, more real. It was ours, and that was enough. Epilogue. 5 years after Hope's birth, on a crisp autumn morning, I stood in our kitchen making breakfast while our daughter chattered about her first day of kindergarten. She'd inherited Vincent's dark hair and my stubborn streak, a combination that kept us both on our toes. Vincent appeared in the doorway, impeccably dressed for work, and Hope launched herself at him with a squeal. He caught her easily, lifting her high and making her giggle. "Ready for school, Piccola?" he asked, and she nodded enthusiastically. I watched them together. This man who'd once been my captor, now the devoted father who coached Hope's soccer team and read her bedtime stories every night, and marveled at the journey we'd taken. The clinic where I worked had expanded, serving 3 neighborhoods now. Vincent had legitimized most of his business operations, focusing on real estate development and construction. He still had connections to his old world, probably always would, but he kept that carefully separate from our family life. We'd built something beautiful from the worst possible beginning. And every day, I chose him. Every day, he chose me. That was love, not the fairy tale kind, but the real, messy, complicated kind that survived impossible odds. And it was more than enough. It was everything.